Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here at 8 a.m. every single morning on New Zealand Sport Radio. So hi, I'm Paul, your host for today. And in the headlines today, Fox Sport keep their wallet closed. Warriors stay put in New Zealand for now. New Zealand Rugby and the NRPA announced pay cuts, and the PGA announced when they will be back. So let's pass straight over to Steve from the Deep South, who'll take us through our football news.
Yes, good morning to all the eyes and ears out there today. Getting ready to start your day the best way once again with the football news today. Not a huge amount going around in the football world, but we do have round 5 of the Belarusian Premier League kicking off tonight. The EPL set their dates to finish the season, bizarrely. But first, we have, of course, the 15-year relationship between Fox Sport and Australian football looks set to be heading towards a messy divorce. Thursday was the deadline for the final broadcast payment of the season, but no money has been paid to anyone. This move comes as a major surprise, as it was believed Fox were legally required to honour the final instalment and would use that as leverage to pull themselves away from the final remaining 3 years of the contract. Unsurprisingly, though, neither side of this relationship are willing to talk about what's going on, and they're keeping their feelings quite close to their chest and bottled up inside. And we all know that these two sides are blaming each other for it all going wrong. Fox said earlier in the season that if the season doesn't finish, the league breaks the contract. While the league is saying that if that final payment wasn't made, that Fox has broken the contract. So the two teams are really just bashing their heads against a brick wall. Either way, we're still a week away from knowing any more about the A-League decision, but we have already seen FFA seeking and hiring legal advice already about the matter against Fox. Both parties are set to meet later this week, which could see them actually settle something outside of the courtroom and in a more civil way. But the way these two parties have been going around this year already, it's difficult to see that happening at all. EPL clubs are set to meet today to discuss putting a deadline, a finishing date on their season. So that's going to be the 30th of June, with some of the financial and contractual issues to work through, and whether they can push them back with the acceptance of players is becoming a bigger problem than they originally anticipated. It could see bizarre instances like teams losing players with games still remaining if the season does get back underway. More ideas of promoting 2 championship winners and no relegation next season to recover any broadcasting money is a possibility to happen as well. So we could see some big news out of the Premier League tomorrow or the next day. But as it's gone on most of the season, nothing much changes when these Premier League teams talk together. The only thing they seem to be solving is that they're running out of time to get their season completed this year. And of course, finally, it is the big news of the day. Get your excited hats on, because football is back for another weekend in the Belarusian Premier League. We've got 2 matches tonight with one of the top sides in the league, Energetic. They will be hosting Stevens Resurgent Gorodaya. They're the first team in action as they are looking to kick off round 5, like they've done the last 2 rounds we've followed, with big wins. The second match tonight has no bearing on any of our teams, but it's Dynamo Minsk, who are down on 14th, and they will be hosting the 11th place Neman Grodno in the second and only 2 matches tonight. As usual, we'll have those results tomorrow for you, and we have plenty more matches coming for the next couple of nights as well. Even on a Sunday night, there's going to be 4 consecutive games, so no excuse not to have a big all-nighter watching Belarusian football. Great idea, Paul. That is me for football as well, and I'll see you all again tomorrow for plenty more news.
Thank you very much, Stephen, from the Deep South, for giving us our football update. Now, later on today on New Zealand Radio Sport, we are going to have an exclusive interview with Tony Lewis, the CEO of Tasman Rugby. So dial in for that at 2 p.m. today, or you can catch the recording as a podcast, or obviously watch the recording here on the Facebook page as well. As I hand you over to Stephen from the far north, who will take us through our birthdays for today.
Well, thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. This morning in birthdays, an all-black locking legend, a promising New Zealand footballer, and a New Zealand, an English-born New Zealand cricket. Roger, and that's where we'll start. Roger Tews is an English-born cricketer who played 16 tests and 87 one-day internationals for New Zealand in the mid-90s. Tews played county cricket for Devon and Warwickshire before joining Northern Districts in the 1989-1990 season, before making his debut for New Zealand in 1995. Roger Graham Toos, born this day, the 17th of April 1968, in Torquay, England. He is 52 today. Moving on to the round ball game, Hamish Watson is a New Zealand footballer who plays as a centre forward for the National Premier League Victoria side Melbourne Knights. He has previously played for Lower Hutt City, Hawke's Bay United, Grimsby Town, Wellington Phoenix and Team Wellington. Hamish John Saunders, Watson, born this day, the 17th of April 1993 in Lower Hutt. He is 27 today. And finally, a rugby legend. Ian James is a former New Zealand rugby union player. He played 79 tests for the All Blacks. He is the second most capped lock with 79 test caps. He formed one of the most famous locking pairings in international rugby, often partnering with Robin Brooke in the All Blacks from 1992 to 1998. Jones played for Northland, North Harbour and the Chiefs. Ian Donald James, born this day, the 17th of April 1967 in Whangarei. He is 53 today. I should also mention he is a very, very good broadcaster for Sky Television and also an analyst. Good man.
And happy birthday to all of them. Let them stay safe in their bubbles. Have a good old party. Moving on then to rugby news. In Super Rugby news, Sam Whitelock could be available for both the Crusaders and Canterbury due to the Japan Top League shutdown. So, he could be making an early comeback for those Tides. Obviously, he'll only be playing for the Canterbury if the All Blacks are playing for their Mitre 10 Cup sides this season, which is looking increasingly likely. However, Chiefs fans, don't get your hopes up too much because unfortunately it sounds like Brodie Retallick is unlikely to return as he has a longer contract in Japan through to the 21 season, so we don't expect to see him back on New Zealand shores. In other New Zealand rugby news, the New Zealand Rugby and the New Zealand Rugby Players Association have agreed pay cuts for the players. The key points are that they're going to freeze all team assembly and tournament fees for all national teams, excluding the Black Ferns. They're going to freeze contributions to the Players Savings Scheme, but they are retaining their KiwiSaver contributions. Freezing promotional payments and the vast majority of player performance incentives. And then from the May the 1st, freezing 15% of players' 2020 base salary for those who are paid more than $50,000 a year. They're also that'll raise up to 30% in September. Reductions in funding for other initiatives for players that are funded by player payment pool will also be reduced, while they're still maintaining the insurance cover and the well-being and development initiatives, which are obviously very important for the players. I guess what we can see there is that we're talking about a 15% cut or 30% and then 30% for the players. Pardon me. But they're talking about the All Blacks taking a 50% pay cut, which shows you how much of their pay is down to those assemblies, appearance fees, and also incentives to do well. And let's be honest, the All Blacks do well most years, so that's nearly an automatic pickup on most of those incentives. So it shows you that their base salaries, if they get reported, are not their entire salary by any stretch. In other Super Rugby news, the Jaguares have been told apparently that they will not be playing Super Rugby this year. This comes from Paul Tate, who is a big reporter for the Jaguares and is very accurate with his predictions for player lineups. So he's a very good source. So it sounds like the Jaguares will not be playing in any part of the domestic Super Rugby pieces going forwards this year, unfortunately. Moving on to World Rugby, and the President Bill Beaumont has talked about reviewing the eligibility rules so that players could represent more than one country. This is something that the Pacific Islands in particular have been calling for, and this does look like a move by him to try and garner some Tier 2 support in his election campaign. We might remember that Bill Beaumont was seconded by Fiji, and his running partner Bernard Laporte from France has managed to engineer actually maybe it's not him, but hey, the French have decided to second Fiji's nomination for the Executive Committee. This is Francis Keane, who is the Fiji Rugby Union chairman currently and brother-in-law to the Fiji Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama. Keane was also convicted of manslaughter after punching and kicking a man at one of his daughter-in-law's weddings. He ended up serving only 3 months in jail for that. You got to question: is this really the kind of person that we want on the chief executive on the executive committee for rugby? In other news around the vote, Argentina have withdrawn from the 2027 Rugby World Cup bidding process and have thrown their lot behind Australia. Australia were one of the countries that seconded Agustin Pichot's nomination for the chairmanship. So if they're connected, who knows? Probably a good time now to remind ourselves of what are the rugby values. The rugby values are integrity, passion, solidarity, discipline and respect. And you've got to wonder, are those at the top of the game following those currently in this election campaign? Moving on to Saracens, top players, which include Farrell, Itoje and the Vunipola brothers, are being asked to defer 90% of their pay. That's after taking a 25% pay cut. The suggestion is that will be paid back over 18 months to keep Saracens solvent. How this impacts the salary cap is anybody's guess at the moment, because obviously those payments would now be made outside of this window and into the next window, and potentially the window after that as well. So quite how that all works out, we'll have to wait and see. That is your rugby update today, and boy has it been a bumper edition of rugby. I'm going to hand you over now to Stephen for the Far North, who'll take us through our league news.
Thank you again, Paul. I'm not too sure if those rugby values are being adhered to in the particular sport that I'm about to talk about in one moment. However, there is some league news. Reports are surfacing the Warriors won't be flying to Australia this weekend, and it's now feasible that they won't cross the Tasman until much later this month. The idea of the team leaving for Sydney this Sunday always seemed like pie in the sky scenario, especially given New Zealand will remain in a stage 4 lockdown until at least Wednesday, but I think that's pretty much changed over the last 24 hours. That would have made it impossible for the club's operations and coaching staff to convey at Mount Smart, which is closed at this time, and gather all the necessary gear and equipment, let alone the meetings required to coordinate the players before a period away from home that could stretch on for months. But the club needed to flag that possibility of an imminent departure, given that's what would have been required to meet the milestone dates under the NRL proposal to restart the competition on May 24. It would see them training while serving their 14-day isolation period in Australia, rather than being confined to hotel rooms. The club would need to be in a self-contained facility similar to the one in Phoenix camp last month in North Sydney before the A-League season was suspended. If that proposal comes to fruition, that would take the pressure off the Auckland club to get across to Australia, while also leaving the May 28 restart as a very real possibility. But it would be a contingent on special dispensation from Australian border authorities, firstly to enter the country, and secondly to be able to obtain isolation. I do wonder, with the changes that's happened in the last 24 hours or so, there could be that opportunity. And of course, our next story is in and around the start of the competition. The NRL won't have a revised season structure until at least next week, after Friday's Project Apollo committee meeting was postponed. Wayne Pearce's Innovation Committee had been due to convene on Friday after days of talks between the NRL bosses and the game's broadcasters. However, that has now been pushed back to early next week as discussions with Nine and Foxtel to sort through the cost structure and logistics continue. Once discussions with the broadcasters are finalised, Pearce's committee will be tasked with quickly locking in a revamped schedule. The NRL is also expected to pitch its plans to the New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro next week in what shapes as a crucial few days for the sport. The NRL have every right to pitch government in relation to what the return of the NRL could be, Barilaro said. Does it include the Warriors, the Queensland sides? We don't know at this point. Next week, they'll pitch it to me in their process protocols, their measures in relation to how they protect the community and those players. League officials are still confident they can work towards the planned 28th restart. The biggest hurdle, though, still appears to be the Warriors. And finally, talks going on between the Players Union and NRL Club on Thursday, with Australian borders remaining closed and exempt required. So those are an ongoing story, Paul.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I'd just like to remind everybody that at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, we have the best New Zealand sports quiz on radio, which is Do You Know Sport? So if you would like to take part in that sports quiz, find yourself one mate. It's teams of two taking each other on. So let me know if you'd like to be part of that. Moving on to other sports news, and in baseball, the Auckland Tuatara manager Steve Mintz has reported that they had a near miss with a tornado. He lives in North Carolina, which is part of the tornado alley, and a tornado passed over their house. Luckily, it didn't land. He did say he was stood in his doorway and he saw a tornado basically destroy his neighbour's brick house. He said it was there 1 minute and then it was gone soon afterwards. So clearly, not only is coronavirus an issue for them, there's other natural risks as well over there. In other baseball news, Major League Baseball might be back starting on the 4th of July. They have a plan to use Arizona, where a lot of the teams have got training bases and training pitches they could use, and also there are lots of hotels that are empty down there currently. And whilst we've heard from the president before that he might want to get sports back, this one came with a little bit more credibility, as it was his chief science advisor that mentioned it on a podcast. Chief medical advisor, and he's the person that's been giving guidance in the USA as to their responses. So Major League Baseball may be back behind closed doors. The fate of in tennis news, the fate of this year's US Open will not be decided until June, but it's highly unlikely that it will be staged behind closed doors. The reason for that is, even when the tournament is behind closed doors, it still involves several thousand people to make the event happen. So if you're going to have several thousand people mixing, you might as well have the doors open and have everybody mixing. So I think that it's either going to have to be safe enough for everybody or not safe enough to host at all. In contrast, the PGA, the golfing body, have announced plans to resume in June, with the first 4 of their tournaments to be played behind closed doors in what is a rejigged schedule. It's going to be a confusing time for golf players, as the PGA Tour will end its 2019-20 season and starts the 2021 season before it has played 2 of the majors that are part of the 2019-20 season. So confusing time for golfers trying to keep track of which season they're playing in. The first tournament back is in Charles Schwab Challenge in Texas, and is scheduled to take place on the 11th to the 14th of June. That's it, folks. That is your sports news for today. You've started the day in the best way, up to speed with all the important news. And don't forget, you can join us here at 8 a.m. every single morning to have your morning sports briefing. And we had a special Hash Rugby chat last night with Willie Jackson, going through the best All Blacks 15 he had seen. Cracker of a show of that. So you can also catch that one here on the here on the Facebook page, and I will be getting it out as a podcast later today. Stay safe, everybody, and have a good day in your bubble.